Cool. So I'm now recording. And I know Jeeper wanted to watch this because he's interested in VOR approaches. And VOR and lock approaches, as far as the practical side of things, are very similar. The only difference is that locks are twice as accurate as VORs on the needle. So if I remember correctly, lock is 1.4 degrees and VORs is 2.8. If something along those lines, I don't remember exactly, but the application is exactly the same. So what will change will be the minima and when you would use each. So let's jump into it. If at any point you guys have questions, just interrupt me and ask that question. So let's get cracking. Localizer approach. So what we're going to cover today, we're going to understand what an ILS approach is because localizer approaches are technically ILS approaches. Um, so then after that, we'll be able to sort of get more into it and discuss local new approaches specifically. We're going to discuss reading charts. Does anybody not have the Navigraph charts?
Yeah, we have most of us, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have them, yeah.
Alright, so everybody here has them.
I'm just
Uh,
looking through.
If someone doesn't have them, let me know and I'll send you a screenshot for the chart we'll be using today. Okay? So you can PM me or something or raise your hand later. So this is just an example of an ILS chart. I'm sure most of you have seen one before. We'll also look at how to determine, so how to read the chart, setting up the approach using the chart, doing one way of doing it, and we will touch on very briefly briefing an approach. We're not going to cover that because that's an entire subject in itself, but we'll just very briefly discuss the sort of things you'd be looking at in order to make sure that you set up everything correctly. Then we'll discuss how to target a vertical rate to do the approach to perform the approach successfully, and then how we're going to monitor the approach throughout so that we always make sure we're within parameters. So, ILS approach. First of all, what does ILS stand for? Anybody got an answer?
Instrument landing system.
Yeah, instrument landing system, which is just a fancy way of saying there's an instrument that guides me down to the ground. It's a 3D approach. They used to be called precision approaches. That's been changed with the advent of RNAV approaches, RNP approaches. So it used to be precision, non-precision. Now it's 3D and 2D approaches. So an ILS approach is a 3D approach, and you're going to have two components. The glide slope, which determines our height above and below the target profile, and then the localizer, which is relative to the center line of the runway. So for now, it's the most common type of instrument approach in the world, and it has been for a very long time. I say for now because what's going to happen is that RNAV and RNP are going to take over. And the reason for that is because they're more accurate, they allow you to create more flexible approaches, and they're a heck of a lot cheaper to maintain and to certify. So in my opinion, as in the next few years, we're going to see ILS becoming less and less common as more aircraft become equipped with the ability to perform LVP procedures using RNAV and RNP. So the glide slope will be calibrated so that it reads 0 at the touchdown point, so that line will be down to the touchdown zone. And the way it does that is the emitters for the localizer and the glide slope are both going to emit two bands, two radio waves, and they're going to be at 90 and 150 hertz each. And as you can see, they overlap. So it creates these sort of like extended heart shapes. And so what happens is that our ILS receiver on the aircraft then determines the interference and finds where it's about the same. And so that will be the middle of those two, and that's how we determine the localizer and glide slope. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep.
For me, yes. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And of course, so the standard glide slope is going to be 3 degrees. You can have non-standards, as we all know. So I've seen the charts for London City. I believe that's 4.5, if I'm not mistaken, or 3.9 or
Yep.
something.
That's the one.
Yeah. So you'll have some non-standard ones. I think I think his runway 05 in Glasgow might be 3.5. I'm not sure. But anyways, so 3 degrees is the standard. So here's a nice picture which really summarizes that well. You've got the localizer frequencies 150 and 90, and then the middle is the interception point, and then same for the glide slope. So you got that modulation. Uh, does anybody not know what outer and middle markers are?
Um, yeah, I'm gonna admit that I don't.
That's fine. So if I'm sharing my monitor right now, I believe. Oh, I got a message. I'm sharing my monitor right now. So let me just open Navigraph. And yeah, Albert, I'll send you that screenshot as well. So EGPF, sorry, yeah, EPF. Let's do Glasgow. Not sure if they do have them, but so they're becoming less and less common. So that's we'll have it. Let's see, Kalmar I know has one. So yeah, okay. So you've got a middle marker here. So be before DMEs were not that common. Does any so distant measuring equipments? It was not that common, and so you would have ILS approaches without DME, and you do have to make checks. You have to check how far you are from the runway at certain altitudes. So that's why we have these right here. So you got at Kalmar DME, 6 miles we should be at 1750 feet. At 5 miles we should be at 1430. At 4 miles we should be 1110, and so forth. Okay, remember that. This is going to be important for today. So middle markers and outer markers will basically let you know when you're over them. So you hear that beep, beep, beep. You know, sometimes when you're in ILS in some places around the world, because it does
Yep.
it automatically. You don't need to tune anything. As long as you tune to the ILS, it will sound when you get close, when you fly over them. And so when
Yep.
you hear that sound, you can then check your altitude because you know, well, while I'm over the middle marker, I'm going to be zero point 0.6 meters miles away, um, and so forth. I mean, this one's quite close, so I don't think you'd actually be able to see, but so the LOM, for example, 3.5. So that's the outer marker. Oh, locator and outer marker, 3.5 miles. At 3.5 miles, well, 811.10. So I should be around 1,000 feet, or a 950 feet or something. And that tells you that you are on the correct glide slope. Okay. So those are essentially what middle
Uh,
markers and outer markers and even inner markers are.
yeah, I have one question.
Yeah.
Now, normally when we fly the ILS, we follow the ILS markers. I mean, the vertical and the horizontal,
Yeah, the
the di di
localizer and the
yeah,
glide slope.
diamond, yeah, diamonds.
Yes, the
Uh,
localizer and the glide slope.
yeah, so why it is really necessary to track the miles and the height since we are following the diamond
Mate, that
markers?
that is an that's a really good, that's a really really good question. Next question. Nah, okay. So, what's going to happen is there you can make mistakes. We are humans. So first of all, we're checking that we've got our altimeter set correctly. Make sure we got the good QNH in, right? Or altimeter if you're in the US. So because you could be on the glide slope correctly, but you forgot to change from transition from QNE, the flight levels 1013 to QNH, for example.
Mhm.
Yeah, you could, it could be a number of things. I mean, I remember once when I was flying, the captain told me to set a frequency that was incorrect. I picked him up on it. It happens often. But if I hadn't, we would have been 10 hectopascals off, which is 300 feet difference. You know,
Oh,
but then if I hadn't picked him up on it, and we do the approach and go, oh look, at 8 miles we should be at, sorry, 6 miles we should be at 1750, but actually it says we're at 2000.
mm,
Yeah, something's wrong here. So
oh,
that's the first reason. Yeah. So set
oh,
off those alarm bells, and one of the first things we're going to check is the QNH. The other reason is because ILS glide slopes don't emit a single glide slope. They emit ghost glide slopes.
oh,
Which is why a lot of, the normal convention is you don't intercept glide slopes from above. Now, that's funny because Airbus has a specific procedure to do just that. But you could intercept the steeper glide slope accidentally, or worse yet, the shallower glide slope. Yeah, but
Mm.
so that's the reason we're making sure that we're on the correct glide slope. So that's the second reason. So
Oh,
check the altimeter setting and to make sure we're on the correct glide slope. Okay,
yeah. Thanks. Thanks. Yeah,
cool.
I got it.
Right. So with the ILS sort of discussed, one more thing. Does anybody not know what a DME is?
Distance measuring
Yeah.
equipment.
Yeah, distance measuring equipment. So it's all it is. It's a thing that you tune to and it'll measure your distance. A lot of ILSs have a DME co-located and also on the same frequency. So when you tune the ILS or the VOR, you will you will get a DME readout as well. So if I look here again, so if we look here, let's see, Kalmar, you see 116.6 KAL. You can see it's an ILS, and you got that little D, which tells you it's a DME. So if we go back to Glasgow,
It's not switched to screens there, Terry.
it hasn't switched screens.
No, it's still showing the slide.
Oh, bloody hell, so I was showing you a bunch of charts for nothing. Okay, sorry guys.
I was wondering what you're looking at.
Sorry guys. Guys, feel free to speak up.
Oh, I've actually got the Edinburgh chart open here anyway, so I
Aye,
could follow it all.
fair enough. So
Yeah.
if I look here, so if I look, can you see my screen now?
Yeah. Yeah. Now.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got Kalmar here, so you can see that's an ILS. Uh, and sorry, that's the VOR. If I go to MQ, there you go. You got MQ, which is right here, ILS. You see that actually that doesn't have a DME readout, but this VOR does. This VOR right here, you got the D. So if I go to Glasgow, open that up, runway 23. This is the one we'll be doing today, by the way. Glasgow runway 23. So let me just, I'll just copy that now so I can send it to Albert. I think it was. Uh, I hope
It
you're
was.
okay with dark mode.
No, that's okay.
Okay. So, oh look, that's cheating. Um, so if we look at the Glasgow IOO, you see here you've got that, and then you'll see that says ILS DME. Okay. So now we know
Uh,
that when we tune into 110.1, you should have a DME readout. And then you can see India Oscar Oscar has the distance altitude cross checks. And then because this is not just an ILS, it's also a it's a VOR ILS DME or NDB ILS DME. You know, so you've got about four different approaches in this chart. So you can see you've got GAL, which is the VOR. So you've got the two different distances because they're not co-located. They're slightly different places in the airport. So then you can do your distance checks based on whichever one you're using, whether you're doing a localizer approach or whether you're doing a VOR approach. Okay,
Yeah.
yep.
cool. Let's see. Pop quiz. Does anybody know what that star is next to ground?
Mm. No. No. I don't know.
It
Yeah.
means it means it's got it's not open 24/7. It's got operating hours.
Uh,
So that doesn't mean anything to us, but if we had the full like reference charts, so like all the text data isn't available in these charts, which you would get with a real Jepson. So you'd get sort of all these text charts which would tell you what times they're actually open. Does it matter on flight sim? Not really, so we don't care. Okay, but it's good if you ever want to go flying for real, and you end up doing your instrument rating and you see that, now you know what it means.
It means Glaswegians are lazy.
Absolutely. Oh, the controllers at Glasgow are fantastic. Management are pish, but that's an entire different thing. Okay, so what is a localizer approach? So I've been talking about the ILS. I've been talking about the two components of the ILS. So can anybody guess what a localizer approach is?
Sorry, say that when I get it broke up there.
Can you see the image?
What is a look approach?
Yeah, can you see that?
Yeah.
So can you answer that question? What is a localizer approach?
The horizontal. Uh,
Yeah, you're along the
no,
horizontal sounds good. Continue.
yeah. I mean the glide slope tells us we are at the correct descent rate. The localizer tells us whether we are flying to the correct middle. I mean the center of the align with the center of the runway.
Okay, so first of all, thank you so much for. It's not correct, but I'm really glad you tried to answer that question. Yeah, and this is
Okay.
why I will ask this question. So no, a localizer approach is when you use a localizer only, but not the glide slope.
Oh.
Okay, so you might have glide slope indications, but you have to ignore them. In the case of flight sim, you can't disable the glide slope. So today, when we do the approach, we're going to see the glide slope. Okay, but we're just going to ignore it and go by the distances. So a localizer approach does not use the glide slope. So it's a 2D approach. It's a non-precision approach. Okay?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like an NDB approach, like a VOR approach, it's a non-precision approach. So there's lateral only guidance. So from this, how are we gonna determine if we're on the right glide path? Let's
By
go.
looking at the
Would it be
chart.
the Pappies?
I mean, you're
chart.
VFR, you're IFR, you're in the clouds.
Oh,
Yeah, you have the distance and the correct attitudes. So you have to
Yeah,
check.
exactly correct. So you're gonna do altitude distance checks. So you do these instead of using the glide slope. That's what it is. That's what a localizer approach is. That's what a VOR approach is. You
Wow.
use lateral guidance and then you determine your glide slope yourself coming down. So, okay. So lateral only guidance requires the use of a DME, or there's also the descent fix with the time tracking. So for example, in Kalmar, uh, the VOR and NDB approach can be done without a DME as long as by using a timer. So once you're over the locator, the NDB, you have a timer that you start, and then you certain amount of time until if you see the runway or not. And there are a bunch of different ways of doing it. Nowadays, most of these approaches use a DME. Okay. Now, it's going to be a higher workload unless you fly an Airbus, because the Airbus is fantastic. You just select the localizer, and then it will vertically manage it for you.
Yes.
You know, so it's basically an ILS approach. You got the diamonds; they would just be magenta instead of green, because it's managed by the flight management system. You know, but it's a lot of fun to do it raw data in an Airbus. Right. Today we're gonna be flying general aviation aircraft. I want you to fly a slow aircraft so you have time to do the checks. You know, let's learn to crawl before we sprint. Okay. So when would one use a localizer approach? So the glideslope could be inoperative for several reasons. Technical issues, calibration. It's really interesting. So they'll get like a Baron or a DA-42 or something, one of these airplanes which can fly at about 120, 130 knots because that's roughly the approach speeds for these airliners. And then they'll fly down the glide slope, and they will calibrate the equipment accordingly. So you know, if there are calibration flights going on, that will happen in the middle of the day, and airliners are still coming in. So during that time, it's a lock only approach, or they could do another approach if there is one available. But sometimes they only have an ILS available, so you go, okay, calibration flight in progress. It's lock only. So then the aircraft coming in would have to do a lock only approach and ignore the glide slope indications. You could. I've never done this ever. I've never seen it done. I've heard about it. You could use the opposite runway ILS. Again, this is sort of there'll be airports where this happens. I have yet to see this. I haven't found a single airport where this is the case, where you use the ILS from the opposite runway, so the glide slope won't be indicating correctly, but the localizer will. And you'll be using, typically when that happens, you either be using the DME based on the distance from the ILS on the other threshold, or you'll do it based off of a second nav aid. Um, I've never seen that one. And again,
interesting.
yeah, I've never seen it done before, ever. I've heard about it, never done it myself, never seen a chart for it. Something I've heard. Don't know how accurate this is, but you know, I thought I'd put it there in case you do come across that one day. Lateral only guidance available again, and so reading the charts. Uh, before we jump into reading the charts, let's take a few seconds. We've just taken in a lot of information. Are there any questions? It's okay to ask them later. If you don't come up with a question now, it's okay to ask them in a bit.
For me, it's clear.
Sorry?
For me, it's clear. Yeah.
Cool.
For me, it's clear. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Reading the charts. So I'm not going to cover briefings and details, but I'm just going to look at a chart here. So we've got the Glasgow chart, which is what we'll be doing today, and talk about the 3 steps of reading a chart and setting up the approach. 1, we go to the ATIS box. So if you look on the top of the screen, you've got that ATIS box here. So you tune the ATIS, you listen to the weather. That then forces you to come to the bottom of the chart and check the minima. Okay? So can everybody see the chart clearly enough?
Yeah.
Can you read these numbers
Yeah.
on the stream?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if you
yeah, yeah.
can someone tell me what minima we're going to be using today?
Oh, 430 feet.
Okay.
Oh yeah, 430 feet.
Okay. Yeah, you know what? That's 99% correct. There's 1% left, which is when you're doing an
The
ILS.
elevation.
Sorry?
The elevation, is it of the runway?
No,
Yeah,
no. So the elevation, if you see in the brackets, you got 409 because Glasgow's 21 feet above
Oh,
sea level. So that would
yes.
be so this is altitude as opposed to height, and that would be height. So you could put that in a radio altimeter if you had one, and then this on the altimeter. So the difference is non-precision approaches on these charts are not given a decision altitude. They're actually given a minimum descent altitude. What's the difference? If you're doing an
Oh,
ILS approach, sorry, question?
No. So
No, that's right. Again, guys, feel free to interrupt me at any point. If you're doing an ILS approach, yeah, sorry, go for it.
yeah. One thing. What is the difference between decision altitude and decision height? Uh, I can see DA,
Yeah,
decision altitude, and
DH. Yeah.
yeah,
So what's the difference between altitude and height?
altitude
Sorry, I was teaching
is
something else yesterday. So okay. Okay. Here's my airplane. What's this? And what's this?
Sea level and
Yeah, so this is height.
height.
This and this is altitude.
Ah,
yeah.
Okay.
Got it.
okay.
So if I were flying here, this would be my height. Okay. Really important to know the difference between height and altitude, yeah? So, is anybody in the US right now? Like,
No.
okay. So I'm going to talk ICAO then. ICAO, we've got multiple different pressures. These are the main ones we care about. What's QNH? What does QNH give us?
gives us the pressure to set the yeah.
Altitude, yeah?
Yeah.
What's QFE?
It's the
That
height, I presume. Guessing.
Yeah, so this is important. If I set QFE here for this airport, what will my altimeter indicate? this
Height you're
height,
away from the two ends.
or this one, or that one? If I set QFE and I'm flying here, is it going to give me this height or this height?
Runway height, I presume, is it?
I
Yeah,
don't think it would give you.
sorry?
Ah, no, I was wrong. Doesn't matter.
It's going to give me this height, right? Because this is, so this here, QNH, is the calculated pressure at sea level. QFE is the pressure at the airport level. An altimeter indicates your vertical displacement from a pressure datum, which is just a fancy way of saying the horizontal levels of equal pressure. So if this were 3D, if you imagine this is all the same height.
Mm.
So if you imagine like every point on the planet where the pressure is the say like 1010 hectopascals, for example, and they all connect to form a mesh, that's a pressure datum. Okay? So the altimeter gives us nothing more than our vertical displacement from a selected pressure datum. So when I set the QFE, I've selected the pressure datum at the airport, and my vertical displacement from it is going to be this. So my altimeter might be indicating 3,000 feet, but my vertical distance from the terrain directly below me might be 200 feet.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah, yeah.
So this is really important to differentiate. QNE is just 1013, which gives us flight levels. Yeah, make sense?
Yes.
Yep, got it. Yep.
So going back
Yeah.
to these, if we look at, you got DA and DH. We'll go with the precision ones for now. DA is altitude, DH is height. So
Oh, decision altitude, decision height, of course.
yeah, that's all it is.
Mm.
Okay, good. These are altitudes, as you can see right here. So you'd be using QNH. Americans don't have any of this. They just have two, altimeter and QNE. Altimeter is the equivalent of QNH. Okay?
Yep.
That's it. Cool. So we were talking. So correctly pointed out 430. 430 is the right number to look at because we're looking at the MDA 430. The difference between a decision height and an MDA and a minimum descent height or minimum descent altitude is that a DA is a point where you decide whether you're going to continue or not. But you can go below DA as long as you don't land. Yeah. So I could reach 221 feet, not see the runway, and say, okay, go around, and then take that time to make that decision, add full power, pitch up. I'm gonna go below DA. Yeah, and that's perfectly legal. I'm gonna go slightly below DA, then go around. MDA, that's a minimum descent altitude. I do not want to go below 430. So what we do is we add a little bit on it. So we see 430. The standard in airlines is plus 30. The standard in general aviation is 50. This is not a legal thing. This is just sort of convention. Okay. So we're going to be flying general aviation. So we'll add 50 feet. So 430 plus 50 feet is going to give us 480. So we will decide at 480 feet whether we'll go around and out or not. And we're giving ourselves 50 feet of time to go around so that we don't dip below 430. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so once we have listened to the ATIS, we know we're going to be doing a lock approach, and we've selected 480 for the minima. We're going to check the visibility, make sure it's above 1200 meters, because we'll have all the lights. We're not going to see many of the lights are out. We then look at setting things up. So to set things up, we're going to look at two boxes. The setup box and then the top-down view. And this is, again, we're not going to go into detail because I'm not interested in setting up the missed approach, all that stuff. That would be for another time. All we're interested now is setting up the approach. So we're going to go left to right, make sure we've got everything. Localizer 110.1 set and identified, if possible. It's not always possible. You'd have to identify it later on. If you don't have an auto identifier like the G1000, you'd have to listen to the Morse code, which is right here. You got dot dot then dash 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 3 times for IOO. G1000, you can see the little local identifier appearing. Really important to do that. Set the final approach course. I think we've all done this before.
Yep.
Yep. And this is an altitude cross check. So 4 miles, as you can see, it's not here, the 4 miles. 4 miles, 1340 feet or 1319 height. Okay. So just because that way, if you're gonna miss most of these, you've got one to remember. And then the DH for the ILS, which we're not going to be doing, not applicable. And then we've got this. Sorry, question? Cool. So we've got the runway height. And the reason we care about this is because of something called stabilization gates. So when you're flying airliners, airlines will have what are called stabilization gates. These are altitude heights above the runway at which you must be stabilized. Different airlines will have different criteria for what would be considered stabilized. And my previous airline, it was you need to be established on the approach, less than 1,000 feet per minute, plus 5 knots, plus or minus 5 knots of the V approach, and no major deviations, so no large bank angles, pitch angles, etc. So then that would be considered a stabilized. And for that airline, it was 1,000 feet above, and you round it up. So if it's 21 feet, round it to 100. So you need to be stabilized by 1,100 feet. If you're not fully configured and you don't meet those criteria by the 1,100 feet, you have to go around. You can continue the approach, right? But you have to go around before you land. And I'll tell you why that's useful later on. General aviation, we don't need to worry about that. We don't need to worry about stabilization gates, okay? But at least you know. So if you're flying like an airliner next time and you want to simulate airliner operations more accurately, then you can do that. I know, generally speaking, with Airbus, it's 1,000 feet in IMC and 500 feet VMC. Okay, for those criteria. So now that we've set this up, we then look at the top-down view, and then we would see if we need to set anything else up. Typically you would set the VOR on nav2 and the DME, the NDB as well, because that's going to help you to do a lot. So for example, you can see that the missed approach is to turn left and hold at the VOR or the locator, which tend to be which are co-located in Glasgow. So I would tune both, hold in the VOR but use a locator to get there because you've got the bearing needles, which are quite useful. So I'd tune both and then do that. So this is the sort of thing you're looking for. And then you're briefing yourself on the distances and the heights. Okay, so we're not going to discuss briefings and looking at everything in detail, but just know when you're briefing an approach and preparing an approach, ask yourself the 3 main questions. Where am I? Where am I going? What do I do next? So if I very briefly, I will jump into the sim and I will flight freeze. So I'm flight frozen here. If I look here, not this, if I look here, where am I? First question. Where am I relative to this chart? Well, if I were to, I can see that I'm already attuned to India Oscar Oscar, and I am 15 miles. You see you've got these rings here. They represent 5 miles rings, so 5, 10, 15. So 14.7, I'm somewhere around this ring. Where? Okay, well I can do multiple things. I could spin the course until it's aligned, or I can use a magic of the G1000. Sorry, not this. I can go to the PFD options, bearing 1, ILS 1, and let's see. Yes, there you go, ILS 1. You can see that is pointing towards the beacon. So I'll put bearing 2 because it's clearer. Got a thick line. So I am relative to the beacon on its tail. So right now it's directly north from me, so I'm directly south to it, and that sounds completely wrong. Let's see. So let's see how that does. So if I stick this open, boom. So you can see that this is completely, sorry, not north to me, but 30 degrees behind me to the left. Sorry, losing track of me. So you can see that it's there, 30 degrees, okay? So I've answered the first question, where am I? Where am I going? Well, I would like to intercept the localizer somewhere around here. Since I know that I'm here, I want to intercept at 30 degrees or less because I'm general aviation. So I'm going to get a little bit closer, and then I'm going to make a left turn. The inbound is 228. So, so we're going to go to the right, so plus 30 degrees. 228 plus 30 is going to be 258. So I'll be turning to a heading of 258. What do I do next? Well, I'm going to intercept the localizer, fly along the localizer, and then at 8.9 miles, which is the descent point, as you can see here, 8.9 miles, India, Oscar, Oscar, I'm going to start my descent. Where am I? Where am I going? What do I do next? Cool?
Cool.
Get rid of these bearings, I don't want them right now. Cool, so, pause this because of the noise. Right. How do we manage a descent? So when we're flying, we need to follow that 3-degree glide slope. As you can see at Glasgow, it's a standard 3-degree glide. And I'll show you that in a second. As you can see here, it's a bit of a giveaway. But we already discussed the distance altitude cross checks. We're going to do these cross checks. But what descent rate do we need to respect those? To fly a continuous descent? Sorry?
Oh, sorry, I'm just announcing something there. Sorry, I'm in work.
No worries, no
I
worries.
forgot I wasn't good.
That's
Forgot
alright.
I put it on pause.
That's alright, mate.
Yeah. Albert works at Shannon Airport.
Really? That's pretty sweet, actually. Must be crazy busy there.
We're actually fogged out, so your localizer approach tonight would be great.
Oh my.
Thick fog here.
The rate of descent we're going to use, the calculation is ground speed divided by 5. So the easiest way to do it is just half your current one and then add a 0 to the end. So if I'm flying at 100 knots ground speed, half of 100 is 50, add a 0, 500 feet per minute.
500 feet. Yes.
And I just realized I put divided by, it should be times 5. Sorry.
I think I've missed that anyway. That didn't register there.
Okay. So let me go back in the simulator then. So right now, my ground speed is 107 knots. Can you see that there?
Yeah.
So if I were to do a 3-degree glide descent, so descend at a 3-degree angle, what I would need to do is to select a descent rate, so a VS, vertical speed, which is the ground speed times 5. So here it's quite easy to calculate. Call it 110 times 5, 550. Yeah?
Yeah.
Feet per minute. But sometimes you have like speeds where it can be quite difficult to calculate. You might have 130 to 205, whatever. So the trick I use is divide that by 2 and then add a 0 at the end. So 107, call it 110, divided by 2 is going to be 55. Add a 0, 550.
Yeah, that is easier.
So that's easier in the long term. So this is how I do. And it's important to continually cross-check the ground speed because wind changes in magnitude and direction as you descend through the atmosphere. Okay? Especially through the last 2,000 feet. Because of our graphic effects, because of ground friction, because of buildings, trees, all that, and of course the Coriolis effect. So all these things mean that the wind direction will change as you descend, as a rule of thumb. So and of course, you as a pilot will be configuring, slowing down, adding flaps, changing speed. So we add that ground speed as part of our scan. Okay?
Okay.
Cool. So I'm going to look at the Glasgow chart, and you can see here that below the horizontal profile, we have a wee box here. And the wee box, you've got GS3. That's telling us the glide slope angle. So 3 is standard. So we can use that formula. But it's really useful because it gives us figures. So if we use our formula, 120 divide by 2 is 60, add a 0, 600. That gives you 637. So it's roughly right. Yeah?
Yeah.
So now we've got these figures to help us out if we need to. And this is especially useful when you've got non-standard descent rates. This is very, very useful. Okay. Alright. Pause this again. We'll go back into here to do the last slide. So, monitoring the descent. So obviously we don't have anything to tell us we're above or below except for the graph, the table. And so might not be perfect, so we need to continually adjust. So we do a standard instrument scan. We're going to add the glide slope. We're going to add the DME to the scan. And we're going to vocalize distance checks. So let's say, okay, I'll give you an example here. We reach 7 miles IOO. Okay, 7 miles. We call our current altitude. We say how we are relative to it, and we call the next numbers. So 7 miles, 2310, 10 above, next 6 miles, 1980 feet. Make sense?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Let's say I reach on the 5 mile one. I'm 20 feet below. Anybody want to gander the call? The distance check? Anyone want to practice that?
5 miles, 1680 feet, 20 below. Next 3 is 1030 feet.
Very close. Just one thing. You called 1680, but and then you said 20 below.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, absolutely. That was exactly correct. Anyone like to practice one more? Guys, it's okay to get things wrong. It's fine. Okay. So then 3 miles, 1030 on profile. Next 2 miles, 710. Okay? So I tend to use the two figures, 1660, 1030, 710, 2300, 2620, and so forth. Okay? It makes your life easier instead of going 7 miles, 2300, 6 miles, 1980. Yeah? So
Yes.
5 miles, 1660, next 3 miles, 1030. Okay?
Yep.
Cool. So this is in reality, you're not going to be doing every single one. And you probably miss the first one because that's the time it takes for you to set up on the descent. It'll take you about a mile. Set up on the descent. And let's say I'm too low. Shallow out the descent rate by about 20, 30 feet per minute. Really, really small corrections, yeah? And then the next one, if you're still too low, as long as it's closer than it was in the previous check, you're still fine. Yeah? As long as that correction is coming in, right? Like if you're flying parallel, that's okay, it's not ideal. But or deviating, that's definitely an issue. But if you're flying towards it, if you're continually correcting, that's fine. Okay.
Attention all boats, crash alarm will be tested in 5 minutes.
All right. So let's demonstrate this a little bit. So I know I'm. Yeah. Question? Okay. So I'm 10 miles out. I'm pretty sharpish angle here, and my chart has disappeared. Okay, here it is. So I can see here I'm cheating a little bit, so I'll turn that off. Thank you. And I know that the inbound is 228, which should be set... bloody hell. Should be set here. So I'm going to go ahead and set 228 plus 30, because it's beyond. So I'm going to go and set 258. And now I'm going to intercept the localizer. Does anybody know what the purple diamond here is?
No.
It's your track. Okay. Who knows the difference between track and heading?
Track is the actual direction you are flying, and heading is the direction the aircraft is facing.
Exactly. Yeah. So why do we care about the track diamond?
Because that is the direction we are actually flying.
Yeah, exactly. The localizer is along a track. We want to fly that track, but if we've got a wind, we need to fly like this. And so the track diamond is really useful, because as long as we put that track diamond on the bearing we want to, on the track we want to go, then we'll be flying down it. Okay? Basically that. So that purple diamond is a track diamond. So right now, my track is a little bit to the right. I can maintain the 258 heading, or I can correct. And there you go. So where am I? I'm 13.8 miles out. I know that my descent points... What is up with this? I know my descent point's 8.9 miles out. So as long as I intercept before the 8.9, I'm golden. Which I don't know if I'll do. We'll see. What does it say? Side note, no, there he is. This is broken. Interesting. Okay. So if I can cheat and use this, and I can see that the final fix, I believe, is this one, which is where you start the descent. We'll see. So I'm watching for that localizer. There's the local. Whoa, interesting. We're gonna very bumpy. So we're gonna go ahead and turn. I turn on the heading first, and then I correct for the winds. Okay, I turned too early, so let's go ahead and pull out a little again. We want to have at least the diamond in here. Now I'm monitoring 12.1. If I go ahead, come in here, I'm going to zoom this in, close this out, and at 8.9 we're going to start the descent. We're 2,900 correctly. So I'll just minimize this. No, that's not what I wanted to do. Minimize this, thank you. See how I've made a really small correction? I don't want to make big corrections. If we make a big correction, we're going to porpoise around. You can see the glide slopes coming in for the ILS. We're not interested in that right now. Now, I'm going to slow down. I'm going to maintain 85 knots. That's giving me about 80 knots on the ground speed. So what descent rate do I need?
80
400.
knots.
Descent, yeah, for 80 knots.
400.
Sorry?
400.
400, absolutely correct. 400. So we've got pretty nice headwind, almost bang on. So I'm 10.7 miles. I'm within the dot, so I'm happy as it is, right? I don't need to make any bigger corrections at the moment. Keeping an eye, see now that's up to 90, so let's maintain 450 now, yeah? $10 miles, so we're now 1 mile out. So we're thinking about what we need to do. About half a mile before, I'm going to start reducing power so that we don't start descending too quickly. Okay, so I'm going to start reducing power. I'll say about 1800, I think will give us about the right speeds, if I remember correctly, with the 172. I'm going to select VS. Nope. VS0, please. Thank you. We're now almost there. Turn a couple of headings in. And approaching 8.9. And now we start the descent. We want to descend at 400 again, because we're at 80 knots. Set 400. And you can see it's pretty close here. Yeah? So now I'm going to look at the thing. I'm going to say, okay, that's the descent commenced. I'm going to reduce power a little bit more so that I can actually start adding flaps eventually. And this thing's broken. Does anyone have the chart?
Yeah, I've got it here.
What's the 8 mile check?
Email check is 2620.
2620. 2620, are you sure?
Yeah, at 8 miles.
Okay, so apparently we're too low. Let's pause it because we got the luxury of flight sim. Man, this thing's drunk. Yeah, 8 mile, 2620. So am I too high, too low? Anybody?
You're at standard pressure, aren't you?
Yeah, so let's do that. Okay, standard pressure is fine. I'm not using live weather. So yeah, could be a number of reasons. It could be the sim's just broken, and that's fine. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to continue, and apparently I am too low, so I'm going to shallow it out. 300 feet. Let's make it 200 feet per minute because I am quite low. So next distance, 7 miles, 2300. Well, we're almost at 2300. So what I'm going to do is going to maintain the 200 feet per minute, and then I'm going to be a little bit low for the next one, for the 7 miles, but hopefully I'll be correct for the 6 miles. So looking here, I'm going to add a little bit of power, and then I'm going to add one set of flaps. Currently we're looking at, we need about 350 feet per minute. 200 is good. Continuing that check. Okay, so 7 miles, 2240, 60 below. Next, 6 miles, 1980. Okay, so I'm just going to maintain this vertical rate, and I'm trying to estimate. So we're climbing for some reason, because this is a fantastic autopilot. So let's go down to, let's descend it a little bit further. And sometimes this is where flying manually makes more sense. So I'll go 500 feet per minute, because as you can see we're almost at 6.3, but we're nowhere near 2,000 feet. So we're 200 high at this point. Thank you, shitty flight autopilot. Six miles, 2100, and that is 120 above. Next distance, 5 miles, 1660. So I've got, should be 400 feet per minute because I'm high. I went 500 feet per minute more. I'm going to ignore the glide slope. I know I'm getting below, but I'm going to ignore it for now because we're not meant to be looking at it. Now I can see here I'm getting too fast, so I'm going to put back to 400. And of course it descends to pitch down, so I'm going to take controls here. And I'm going to turn off the flight directors and just fly it manually. Oh, okay, can't turn off the flight directors. Okay, 5 miles, 1440, 20 below. Sorry, 120 below. Next, 3 miles, 1030. Correct for the localizer. Can you not turn off the flight directors on this? That's pathetic. Okay, let's try AP on. Next is going to be 4 miles, which is at the top here, 1340. So we're well below here, so I'm going to go ahead and nose up. At this point, really, you should be going around, by the way. But I'm going to continue. I'm going to blame flight sim for this. So 4 miles, 1340, 340 feet below. Next one is going to be 3 miles, 1030. So adjust as you need to. Okay, I'm climbing now, so I'm going to go ahead and nose down again. I'm at 70 knots, so we're looking about 350. I'm going to go ahead, set the second set of flaps, speed check, flaps 20. Leave it at 1800 feet per minute. Okay, 3 miles, 1020, 10 below. I haven't set a minima, but as we said, it was, if we look here, it's 480. So 2 miles is going to be 710. 65, so look about 300, which is about right here. And now as you can see, I'm slightly off on the localizer, so make sure to monitor both aspects of the approach. Okay, so, excuse me, thank you. Okay, so we got 2 miles, 690, 20 below. So let's shallow it out for a few seconds, because 20 feet is nothing. So shallow it out a little bit for 2 seconds, and then back to our standard glide, and we'll leave it there. 600 feet per minute, we're looking at 300 feet per minute. Sorry, 60 knots, 300 feet per minute. Keep an eye on the localizer. I am already visual, but I'm going to continue down to minimums of 480. So 100 above. Minimums, visual continues. Let's disconnect the autopilot now. Let's, oh yes, it's off. Ha, fantastic. Okay. So I'm a little low, so I'm going to shallow out the descent and just continue visually. That's all it is to it. And I've just done a localizer only approach. A little messy as we went along. There were a couple of times where I really should have gone around, but it's not the end of the world. It's flight simulator. You know, just continue doing the approach. Unless you want to watch me land. Is anyone going to get started on their own sims? It's up to you.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to give it a bash later on this evening, that's for sure. Actually follow the chart and yeah.
But can you see how it was, I mean, except for the autopilot acting like shite and my terrible hand flying, do you see that actually it does follow the glide slope quite nicely?
Yeah, and it's good to actually now be able to take a chart from text and actually understand the methodology behind it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I really didn't cover everything about the chart, like the go around procedure, the missed approach and that kind of stuff. But, you know.
Chris, can you remember you were flying and the runway is nowhere to be seen until the last few feet?
Many a time.
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh, it's
Fantastic.
And X, and X, and X. Cool. So yeah, so use the autopilot. I am very disappointed by the autopilot on this one. But you know, sometimes it does that when you've got loads of turbulence where the autopilot will struggle to keep up. And sometimes you have to take controls. If I was able to turn off that flight director and remove all the noise, I would have continued manually. I hate flying against the flight directors, and it's a big no-no in the airlines. So if you're not going to follow the flight director, turn it off. Big no-no. Don't do it. Don't fly against the flight director, ever. Ever, ever, ever. Okay?
so if you're manually flying, you should always turn it off.
No, you can use it. So for example, I could set a heading and an altitude and then use the flight director to guide me.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So the way I like to explain it is, Does anybody here know a little bit of programming?
Yes. Well, JavaScript.
Yeah, so JavaScript. Okay, so
Yeah.
so if I create a variable, which is just a fancy way of saying a way to store data, and I go a plus equals that, you see you get undefined because we're not
Yeah.
returning anything. So the computer right now, my browser, has a variable called a, which is equals to 3. But there's no way for me to actually access that unless I make it. So I'll do console.log, and that's going to return that a, and so now I can see the 3. The autopilot is the code. The console log is the flight director.
And the penny has now dropped. Yeah.
Yeah. So the flight director is what the autopilot wants you to do. Whether you give autopilot control, where it will follow the flight director or not, is an entirely different matter, right? But the code is telling you to do certain things because you set it up to do those things. Okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so that's the end of the session. If you guys want to call it a day, that's fine. If you want to practice here and then share your screens, I'll be happy to help you out and just stick around here for a while. So it's up to you guys.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to.
Sorry,
And then I'll definitely try it soon.
I disconnected. Sorry, what was that?
Yeah, I'm going to get my monsters in bed, and then I will try when it's quiet.
Okay.
The 3 hooligans. Sorry, I couldn't
Ah,
wait,
he's a-
guys.
Yeah, I've tried everything. Santa's not coming, or the elves are watching. I've tried everything.
Yeah, I'm in work, so I won't be able to do that until tomorrow evening, probably. So,
Of course.
but it was brilliant. Thanks a million.
Of course.
Yeah, this is a very very nice presentation, and I'm very much thankful to you.
No, of course, Rahal. Thank you. Yeah. So is nobody gonna practice now? I just want to make sure because I don't want to abandon anyone who wants it. Albert, I need to send you the. Was it Albert? Who was it that asked me for the?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no panic. I have Navigraphs. It's just that I was in work and I couldn't access them there on my phone, you know. So.
Ah, shoot, mate. Sorry. So you needed it.
Yeah.
I just sent it to you now.
No, it's
Sorry.
That's okay. I was watching yours anyway.
Fair
Yeah,
enough.
I'm actually going to try that exact same approach. You know, Glasgow, Runway 23.
If you want to make it more fun, try and do the procedural.
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll do the flight, and what I'll probably record the approach and all the movements that I do, and post a little video on Discord, and you could rip it to bits or say it was great.
I don't rip things to bits unless they deserve to be, and usually that's.
So this one may deserve to be.
usually it's usually deserved when someone thinks they did great and are showing off that they did great when they really didn't. That's the only time it deserves to be ripped to bits.
Exactly.
It's okay to think you did great and didn't do great, and then I'll walk you through it. But if you didn't do great and you think you did great and then you show it off, that's a different matter.
Exactly.
Like girls allowed.
Sorry?
Like girls allowed.